of the United States of America,
and to the republic
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Okay, thank you very
That's the
much.
hardest part of the meeting, by the way. No, just to stay in queue, that's tricky.
I know. I'm always like, who's going to be the loudest? And then I try to follow them. So, all right. So I guess the next order is may I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 22nd, 2020 regular meeting and July 21st, 2020 special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or amendments?
So I do have a comment about the minutes from the 21st. In item number 3, the quote is Selectman Wilson confirmed that the declaration was not a requirement for FEMA reimbursement. I was questioning that. So I think that's just a typo. So I don't know how you want to rephrase it. But that I inquired about the requirement,
Yeah. I think we could just make that amendment. I don't have that piece in front of me. Where are we under? Oh, Lauren, you got that? All right. Any other amendments or changes? Oops. Jumping ahead. Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes so amended, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any abstentions? Nope. I think everybody, or actually, Aaron, were you? Oh, that's the June 22nd meeting. So was Aaron in attendance of that?
I think she was away on vacation for that.
Yeah. Okay. So we just, I don't know, Aaron, do you want to abstain or do you want to, so for the June 22nd or? Did we lose her?
She shows muted from my end.
Okay. Is she?
Aaron, you there? I'll abstain, she says. She typed it in the chat.
Okay. All right, great. Okay. All right, good. Next item, real briefly, is a quick update on town operations, or just general update. Phase 3 has been postponed for the state reopening plan. We're hoping to get some sort of updated timeline soon from the governor. We hope to get it by August 1st about his thoughts on that. Although given some of the comments, especially today made about, the schools being able to run a hybrid model, I'm not sure if phase 3 will happen in the near term. So we'll see, but I have no inside view on that right now. I'm just saying we're waiting to hear. In terms of town facilities and operations, we continue to offer all services in town government on an appointment basis, as well as by telephone, email, web-based services. We also have drop boxes established outside town hall for any documents that people want to bring in person to town hall. And I think also that the different people have been great meeting people outside also, if they just want to hand deliver something to town hall. A lot of the different departments have been doing that regularly. The long-term recovery committee continues to meet weekly, and I think we had a flurry of activity, when we got into phase 2. Now it's a little bit more dribs and drabs of specific questions relating to businesses or camps or events, and that's been kind of rolling forward on a regular basis. Just trying to get questions, answers, checking with state guidelines, things like that. Boards and commissions have been meeting, although summer is typically slow for a lot of these. So, I know Lauren as well has been hosting a lot of Zoom meetings for different boards and commissions, but, the elected boards are still adhering to their regular schedule, although I guess the Board of Finance canceled their July meeting, but we'll be meeting in August. And then, an event that we do have that's really kind of created a flurry of activity at Town Hall is the August 11th primary. And because of the absentee, there's a little sound going on there, Erin, when you joined.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. The absentee ballot applications have been starting to arrive in town hall. They can either be mailed or they can be dropped off in a drop box that the state has provided to all communities, and we have one right outside of at the town campus. The ballot should be arriving soon in the mail. They've actually had over 2,000 absentee ballot applications for a primary. That's even more than what we normally would get at a presidential election. So I think the good thing is this is a good test run for November if we end up having a high level of absentee ballot participation. But it's required a lot of just logistic discussions about how to handle the process. I had a meeting actually with the registrars and the town clerk today to talk more about that and how we're going to work through it, because also you know, you need space to go through this, to open documents. There's very tight, stringent rules about the you know, transfer of ballots, how they're handled, all that. So I think our team in town hall has done a fantastic job trying to troubleshoot and make sure that they're ready for August 11th. And then secondly, there's still the option to vote in person. And I just want to alert the public again that if you're a District 1 voter and you used to vote in the senior center, you will now be voting in Polson Middle School. And that will continue for the November election as well. And the reason it was moved is because we needed to have more space for social distancing. And there's also a rule that if you hold a primary in one location, the general election has to be in the same location. So Polson will be the voting place for District 1. District 2 will continue to vote at Brown. They were able to accommodate from a spacing standpoint and all that, everything at Brown School. So, so that's, things will be busy, I know, for the town clerk's office. So, you know, just to forewarn the public that, you know, leading up to the primary, you know, it is going to be really tight. And on top of that, she has also alerted me to the fact that a lot of, you know, houses are being bought and sold. And we've all seen that as evidence. So they have been extremely busy with that and all the different documents that they have to file and things that they have to process there. So patience with the town clerk for people if you don't get your call returned right away, but they're working very hard. They just have a lot going on right now. Other events and activities, I know people had been asking about the parade and the fireworks, which we are hoping to do for Labor Day weekend. I think we're reaching the point where, you know, we were intending to be in phase 3 at this point for that event. And so it's still a little bit on hold. I spoke a few days ago with, you know, Sam DeBur. I don't know if he's on this call tonight, but he's reaching out to those groups just to coordinate. And I think they're just waiting to hear what the town wants to do. The parade, I you know, don't know if we're ever going to get to those level of numbers in terms of participation. And the fireworks, I know, attracts a lot of people. So we're going to be thinking more about that in the next week or two. We're hoping to get more guidelines from the state. But it's unclear whether or not those activities can happen on Labor Day weekend. So that is my update. Just a quick one. And then obviously the beaches we'll be talking a little bit more about later in this meeting. And we talked extensively about those last week. Next on the agenda is liaison reports and selectmen comments. So I will open it up to those now. I'll try to take it off of sharing. Where is it? Stop.
I'm happy to go first.
Okay.
Our Island Avenue Investigating Committee is, as you know, has completed a public survey, and they're very eager to share those results with the public and the selectmen very soon. The search, the air search continues regarding the some of the deed restrictions on the property. And an RFP is being prepared as well, as we're all aware of. So they are eager to report to the selectmen sometime soon. Likewise, the Government Studies Committee has been able to continue to meet. They too have completed their survey of the public, and they are eager to present us with the results. And they are also very close to being ready to issue, I guess I'd call it their final report to the public through the selectmen I understand that's going to be scheduled, Peggy, at our August meeting.
Okay. And they, I know they had their septic study. They did some digging last week. So hopefully those results will be available, and I'm sure that's going to drive some of their decisions in August.
Yeah. That's all I have. Thank you.
I saw Bruce raising his hand.
So we'll be talking about an EDC initiative, a revision to an existing plan. So I won't steal all the thunder for that. That's coming up later in the agenda. I wanted to circle back on some comments I made in a subsequent news article from the 22nd with regards to the Ambulance Association. And the Ambulance Association continues to collect about 50% of its operating expenses through its billing, its normal billing. So they're able to collect on about half of what it costs them to run. This has fallen into the characterization of a problematic operating model for the town. But I think it's important to realize that we as a town have a statutory obligation to provide ambulance services. And in the Ambulance Association, we have a non-for-profit group that has taken on the operating role of providing these vital services to the community, not unlike our volunteer firemen have taken on the role in North Madison and downtown. And in return, they're asking for assistance with their capital expenses like our fire departments do. And they're asking for assistance on those operating expenses that they can't cover through their own self-billing operations. And in this respect, I think they very much follow in the spirit of the volunteer firemen, in that it is a group of community people looking to help the town provide a vital service. And I don't think that it's fair to characterize that as a flawed or a challenged business model. It is a model that has and will always require municipal investment, just like it would if we were to be running it ourselves. In fact, it would cost us a lot more. They're able to run probably more efficiently as a private organization than we could as a municipal organization. So it's a challenge for us in that we have to fund it, but we have to fund it. And so I prefer to look at this as the glass is half empty. We have an organization that is filling the glass halfway for us, and we simply have to top it off every year.
Nice analogy, Bruce. I like that.
Remember all of that at budget time, Bruce. So, okay, thank you for that. Any other updates from Selectmen?
I have a couple.
Okay.
So most of you probably know from a Board of Ed standpoint that the official school plans were submitted to the state on Friday and released to the public. So I know there's all sorts of discussions and chatter out there about the three options, one being in person, one being a hybrid, and one being a distance learning, which is obviously the most restrictive. So the school is planning for all three scenarios. So that was discussed on the 14th Board of Ed meeting, as well as sort of just what guidance came out from the state. We also talked a little bit about the extended school year coursework that's going on right now. There's 58 students actually participating right now in the extended school year. And it sounds like it's going very well. The state, I know, has set the school days at 180 days -3 for staff COVID training. So it's actually 177 days. So that was discussed. And then we obviously took on as a board the hand washing stations, but that was a big point of conversation. United Hand Send-Off was on Saturday night. If you didn't get a chance to see it, there was some great fireworks and some really wonderful things that were planned for the senior class as a sort of a final send-off, given that they weren't getting Night at Hand. I just do want to send a little shout out to Joan Walker and all the volunteers. I know Billy Richmond taped it, and there was some just great people on the committee helping to put together such a wonderful event for our seniors. And then last but not least, at the Board of Ed, our favorite topic has resurfaced. Solar panels were discussed in facilities, so something to look forward to again, Bruce. From a library update, so most of you have probably seen at this point, but our library is open, doing and offering self-guided tours. There's a new website that is available that the library is very, very proud of. So if you haven't already, go out and visit the library's new website. You can actually check out books and they'll put them outside for you. And then for seniors, there is some creative things happening where the seniors are helping deliver books for seniors. So there's some neat sort of delivery mechanisms happening as well to accommodate everybody's personal needs. There is a minor issue that they mentioned up from a building standpoint relative to the HVAC. But I know Woody Weiss and team are all over that, working the HVAC issue. I'm not in the know on all the details, but I know they met again tonight to discuss that particular issue. And then lastly, I'm just going to read this update from Youth and Family because Scott Cochran was so wonderful in sending it to me, Scott and Tony DeWina. So this is for Madison Youth and Family Services. It has been a busy summer for Madison Youth and Family Services, and we would like to highlight our summer community services program. This summer, we had to especially be creative with the type of projects that we could do, and our focus has been towards fundraising and providing acts of support and kindness. All activities have been run with careful adherence to COVID safety guidelines. All the activities this summer have come directly from our youth and our staff, along with a core group of youth volunteers continuing to meet and brainstorm for more ideas and activities. Fundraising efforts so far: youth volunteers coordinated a car wash fundraiser that included 10 youth and raised $302 to be used for students in need for back to school supplies. Another car wash is planned for this week to take place at our main office on 10 School Street, Thursday, 12:30 to 4 p.m. The next fundraising event was 10 youth volunteers collected 263 pounds of food and $157 in cash donations in the Stop and Shop parking lot for our Madison Food Pantry. So bravo to those students for doing that. And then from a support and kindness standpoint, rock gardens with special hand-painted rocks were painted in front of the Madison Police Department and the Madison Senior Center to show support and encouragement. 2 more gardens are planned for area nursing homes. This project includes volunteers to paint the rocks and others who will coordinate the placements. Several Madison families have also gotten involved to help with the painting. Then an additional support and kindness activity, total of 10 youth volunteers coordinated 2 separate beach cleanups, so 6 students each, so much appreciation for keeping our beaches clean. And then last but not least, Zoom tutorials for seniors. One youth by the name of Charlie McIntyre created 2 tutorial videos on using Zoom for our seniors and is working on a 3rd video to help with using an iPad. So many thanks to Charlie for that act of kindness and support. So that is my update for Madison Youth and Family Services. Back to you, Peggy.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was quite an update. I appreciate it. I know Scott is always very enthusiastic about all the work being done at Youth and Family Services. Erin, do you have any updates?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Actually.
Okay, well, that's great. And maybe just real quickly, I will say we're starting our bi-weekly meetings with the chairs of the Board of Finance and the Board of Education. It's a great opportunity for the 3 chairs to talk about some of the bigger policy issues that the town will be facing. And, we know we have a number of those. And so we're going to start having an active regular dialogue going forward. And once we have things to report, I will report to you on those. And I think otherwise, we're ready to move on to citizens' comments. Lauren, do we have any citizens who'd like to share their thoughts with us tonight?
Ryan has his hand raised. Ryan Duquesne.
will be allowed to speak.
Hey, thanks, Lauren. Since I have to attend the meeting anyway, I figured I would take an opportunity to make a public comment. I just wanted to touch briefly on the executive orders. I know this board spent quite a bit of time last week discussing the need for the executive orders and the potential risk that they bring to our community. And I had sent Peggy an email following that meeting regarding executive order number 1. As the board knows, there's only been 6 executive orders, so there's not a ton to keep track of here. And I was watching that meeting last week, and it kind of dawned on me that there is a potential issue with executive order number 1, which relates to the e-check or debit card transactions and the fees associated with those and the waiving of those fees until our town hall reopens for regular office hours or the state of emergency has been lifted. Executive order number 1, item number 1, which this is still in place and has not been rescinded. Item number 3 of executive order number 1 was rescinded in one of the other orders. The town's website homepage still reads, town offices are closed to the public except for essential businesses. And in fact, if you click through there, you'll be brought to a page that shows it's a tax collector's office. And that reads that the tax office and tax payments are only available under the online or remote options. And under the in-person options, it actually says not applicable. And yet when I paid my property tax bill on July 1st, I was assessed a convenience fee for paying with my bank account online. Because this order has not been rescinded and because the town website clearly indicates that town hall is closed, I believe this order is still in effect, and I hope that this board reviews and offers refunds to the citizens of Madison that may have been impacted. I suspect it's probably a lot. But furthermore, I think this is just one small example that highlights the possibility that mistakes could be made when we're operating outside the norm of our town charter and when checks and balances are not in place.
If anyone else would like to give public comment at this time, you can raise your hand and I will allow you to speak. No one else is raising their hand, Peggy. Peggy, you're muted.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item number 6, which is discuss and take action to approve a proclamation honoring the following proclamation. And I will read the proclamation honoring Eagle Scouts. The proclamation reads, whereas the Board of Selectmen of the town of Madison hereby proudly acknowledges the outstanding award of Eagle Scout to a member of the Boy Scouts of America, as throughout his commitment to community with a foundation of purpose and a commitment to a high level of leadership, excellence, worthy of acclamation and praise by this board and the entire community. Whereas the board gratefully recognizes the tremendous efforts of this young man. It is with great pride that the board officially extends their congratulations to this newly awarded Eagle Scout and wishes him all the best of luck in his future endeavors. Furthermore, that by the powers vested in the Board of Selectmen by the state of Connecticut and the Madison Charter, we, the members of this board, hereby unanimously acknowledge the scouting achievement of, and I'm going to read, actually, we have 8 scouts tonight that are being honored with this. This would be Dan Chen, Sam Hauser, Kevin Hoban, Ethan Kerr, Andrew Lunn, Jack Mader, Ken Nuzzi, and Will Stramiello. So I hope I pronounced those correct. Done this the 27th day of July, 2020 in the town of Madison, Connecticut on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. So can I get a motion?
So moved.
think somebody's muted. Everybody muted?
I
Second.
said second, sorry.
Second? You have a second?
Okay, great. Now, I'm not sure if any of our Eagle Scouts are present on the call. Do you see anybody? I know that the intention is they're going to have a formal ceremony on August 8th. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to do this, but I know that both Al and Scott and Bruce are probably seasoned veterans at Eagle Scouts ceremonies, but it's very exciting to see our young people take on such a big challenge. It's obviously a long haul to get to this achievement, and we're very proud of them and happy to issue such a proclamation. Any other discussion by the board?
Beyond proud of this group. My son is an Eagle Scout, and I know how hard it is to achieve this rank, and the work that they've put in individually is momentous. So congratulations to each and every one of them.
Great. Okay, any other comments from the board? All right, so
Can we give them a golf clap? I think they need a golf clap or something.
Congratulations if you're watching.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you. So all in favor of approving the proclamation as so read, please say aye.
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 Aye. All right, great. Motion passes. Congratulations to our Eagle Scouts. And we wish you all the best and enjoy your gathering, which I think is on the 8th, is what they're hosting a small event for the Eagle Scouts. So, and I guess it's award ceremony. Moving on to number 7, discuss and take action to approve a donation from the Neighbor to Neighbor Fund in the amount of $20,000 to be used for the COVID relief fund.
So moved.
Before we go on to item number 7, can we open the agenda for 6A to discuss and take action to approve the proclamation for Chief Adrian Ellsworth Bassett that I sent earlier today?
Yes.
Thank you.
So can we need a
I'll make the
motion to
motion to
amend?
open the agenda.
Thank you. Second.
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 Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so the agenda is now open, and I don't have the language in front of me, Lauren.
So I'll read it again. I just need a motion and a second for item 6A, discuss and take action to approve a proclamation honoring Chief Adrian Ellsworth Bassett.
So moved.
I'll move.
Thank you.
Okay, and a discussion, Lauren, if you can remind, and I apologize.
You want me to read it?
Go ahead and read it. I missed this one today, so, but I know our board members approved, so go ahead.
Yes. So it says, whereas Chief Adrian Ellsworth Bassett has been a resident of Madison for many years, and whereas Chief Bassett has been honored by the state of Connecticut as the oldest fire chief in the state of Connecticut, and whereas Chief Bassett has set a lifelong standard of service, both as a veteran and as a firefighter in the state of Connecticut, and whereas Chief Bassett has reached the momentous occasion of his centennial birthday, now therefore we the members of this board hereby unanimously recognize the service of Chief Adrian Ellsworth Bassett, done this 27th day of July 2020 in the town of Madison, Connecticut.
Hear, hear.
Yes, here, here.
That's quite several important milestones, obviously. So that was great news to hear. And I'm assuming Chief Bassett is not on the call with us? Or
No, but there is a big celebration, I guess, on August 13th. So the firehouse will come and get this proclamation and they will present it to him.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. So I guess all in favor of approving the proclamation as read by Lauren, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, great. And congratulations to the chief. That is an amazing milestone. Okay, moving on. Item number 7, discuss and take action to approve a donation from the Neighbor to Neighbor Fund in the amount of $20,000 to be used for the COVID relief fund.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is Scott Cochran on? Okay, great. Scott, if you wouldn't mind, this is obviously something that was started a couple months ago and has continued to be a great service to the community, and we're grateful for another donation.
Yes, my great thanks to well, first of all, hello all. It's nice to see you all. huge thanks to Neighbor that just continues to partner and provide funding for so many different things that we do and that happen in this community. So the COVID Relief Fund is something that we created thanks to the initial donation of $30,000 from Neighbor and also Guilford Savings Bank. And to date, we've spent $29,500 of that initial donation. So the COVID Relief Fund was actually a program that certainly didn't exist. So we had to create a way to disperse the generous donations that were coming in. And to date, we've received 67 separate applications for that program. And that represents 43 different households. So per the program that we created, people can reapply, the same household can reapply 30 days in between, assuming that we still have funding. And the criteria are very basic. It's, basically somebody fills out the application, makes a request, needs to tell us a little bit about what they need the money for, and describe any circumstances, any special circumstances that they may have. And the amounts are granted in the, for a single is 300, a couple is 400, and a family is 500. So to date, we've received 67 different applications from 43 different households. Of all those applications, there were 25 applications, or 25 households, excuse me, that had never applied or asked for any assistance or not known to us at all. So these are 25 households that have not had any need in the past to receive any social assistance through the town. Primarily, people when they're asking for help, it is money that's going towards primarily rent and expenses, household expenses, in some case medical expenses. And also want to mention, we did receive a large amount of donated gift cards from area businesses. And whenever we receive those gift cards, often the businesses would want for us to find a way to get them to households that were really suffering as a result of the pandemic. So we use this program to disperse those gift cards. So we've also shared with those households 85 different gift cards, and those were all to local restaurants that included, I think, a variation that we received from the gift card project, as well as the Schoolhouse Deli had provided 50 gift cards to us at one point that we dispersed. We've also dispersed through a different fund 85 gift cards for food. So there was a while where the food bank wasn't able to deliver food anymore or have food available to people. So the only thing that we could do was leave out gift cards. So over since April, we've distributed 81 different food cards, and those will be dispersed in increments between $25 to $100. And we've dispersed $5,600 in total. And all that was donated through Neighbor as well as St. Andrew's Church. So thank you to our very generous community, and we at Madison Youth and Family Services are so grateful for that funding because it enables us to do and reach do many things and reach many people who need it right now. I don't know if any questions.
I just was going to comment that, especially as we see some of the emergency assistance that's been in place from the federal level, and some of the other things that have given relief for people on mortgages or evictions, we might see a spike in need going forward. And so I think it's fantastic that we're continuing to offer resources to families beyond July 31st. Who might be kind of facing a wall when they have to make some tough decisions, to sustain their households.
Yeah, on a slow week, we get 2 applications. We've had weeks where we've had 11 or 12. And it's hard to tell like when they're going to come because, we can't predict like what circumstances people going in. It might be a bill cycle or it might be something, they're preparing to pay. And so it's really, interesting the way that they come in. It's really not a way that we can predict, which is why we went back to Neighbor when we were running out of the initial donation and asked them to consider donating more, and they very graciously did so.
Well, and I think if we all recall, there was concern that people weren't reaching out enough in the beginning. I think you had that, it was a $30,000, I think, donation initially, and it was a little slow going, but then I think we realized that people had resources, savings, and now they're kind of running through some of that, so.
And we changed some of how we were running that program. Initially, we had some pretty tight guidelines. We wanted to make sure that people who are in the most need got a crack at the money. We weren't sure how people were going to respond. And when we had these very tight guidelines with income requirements, we got, I think, maybe one application in the course of 2 weeks. And we worked with neighbor to neighbor, switched it up very quickly and opened it up for people. And I think that that's had a huge effect. By that next week, we were getting applications very quickly.
Great. Any other questions for Scott or comments?
Huge thank you to neighbor. That's beyond amazing. Kindness does count and run abound in Madison. Pretty cool.
Sure does.
All right, great. Well, let's all in favor of approving a donation from neighbor to neighbor in the amount of $20,000 to be used for the COVID relief fund, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Motion passes. Thank you so much, Scott, and for all the work you guys are doing. And thanks to
Thank you.
neighbor to neighbor. So,
Let's go.
okay, next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve awarding the contract, the Bradley Road Pedestrian Improvements Project to Star Construction Corporation of Stratford, Connecticut for a total bid amount of $205,886.50.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. And I think we've got John and Rob on here who just got the bids in last week, right, guys? So if you could,
Yes, that's correct. Can you hear me?
do you want to give a brief overview of the project? And
Sure. I'm trying to get my video on. Here we go. We received 4 bids for the construction of the pedestrian improvement project on Bradley Road. It's basically sidewalk, about 1,000 feet of sidewalk. There's some sidewalk widening. There are 3 crosswalks. There is a new sidewalk entryway into the Tuxas Walkway. And that's about it, basically sidewalk and the pedestrian improvements. So each of the crosswalk areas will have accessible ramps and so forth. And so we'd like to award that contract to Star Construction Corp. They were the low bidder. Amount of $205,886. And we've used this company one time before. They did the construction of the sidewalk at the surf club Strong Field Houses, and they did a good job on that project. They seem to do quality work. So we would like to recommend awarding the contract to Star Construction.
And just a reminder, this is a project that went through CIP, right?
I was going to say, yeah, it sounds very familiar. So.
Yes, and actually it was part of TOD grant.
Right.
So funded by this grant. There's enough funding to cover the contract amount.
Oh, good. And just remind me, so you're saying the 1,000 feet of sidewalk, that's on which side of the road? Is it the southbound side?
It's on both sides. There's some on the north side and some on the south side. On the south side, it's primarily where there are some sort of wide entryways into businesses where the sidewalk will extend across the driveways into those businesses. So on the south side, you instead of a sidewalk that's sort of intermittent, it's going to run straight through to Wall Street. And then on the north side, it's entirely new sidewalk that will run from the that facility? Trying to think of the name, I'm drawing a blank here.
Vista.
Yes, thank you. The Vista facility over to the Tuxas Walk area. So it'll improve pedestrian access essentially.
What about during construction? Is there any anticipated disruption to businesses as it's occurring?
I think it'll be minimal, temporary, and the contractor will coordinate with the businesses when, ahead of time.
John, are you able to tell us a little bit about why the bid amounts were different? I mean, are there things that we're choosing not to do to keep it lower, or is just everyone's the same and they just happen to bid different amounts?
It's that, there was a base bid, and one alternate, which entailed the sidewalk widening. And I think the alternate bid was pretty consistent, but the base bid would, varied quite a bit here. Not
Yeah.
really sure why. Star Construction did a job, like I said, at the Surf Club, and I think it worked out well for both the town and the construction company. I've speculate maybe they kind of want to have an in with the town of Madison, or do work with the town of Madison again here, but not really sure.
So
Any
I
other
guess,
que-
no more questions, I guess, or we go ahead and vote. All in favor of awarding the contract of the Bradley Road Pedestrian Improvement Project to Star Construction Corporation of Stratford, Connecticut for a total billed amount of $205,886.50. I'll say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, motion passes. Good. Look forward to seeing construction.
Great.
It is a busy spot in town. So, okay, next item on the agenda. I just wanted to put on here again, since this is kind of a weekly thing, as an update on these beach policies and public safety concerns. What I did was, in terms of, I know we talked extensively about this last week, and I'm just seeing if we have members of the public. We did not have members of the public on last week, and so let me just share this up here. So I don't know how extensive we need to get into this, but I'll just do a real brief review again of some of the slides that we had. I have this out of order. Sorry about that. I think we talked a lot about this last week. For the members of the public, this is a couple slides I showed at our last week's presentation, which you can also are available in the minutes on the website. But clearly we have a lot of significant challenges this year because of COVID-19 that are impacting our beaches. And so we're seeing unprecedented demand by residents and non-residents, including increased car and pedestrian traffic at all our facilities, a need for increased staffing and public safety resources to monitor and maintain the facilities, and a need to continually revise our policies to address the volume and adapt to changing guidelines. And we've done a number of things I think the public is well aware of. That includes limiting our parking to residents only Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and holidays, reducing our parking capacity at the Surf Club to keep crowds down, restricting non-resident visitor passes, staffing the beach gates more extensively starting in May, using Salt Meadow at times or allowing for at least to be an overflow parking to encourage people to go into Hammonasset rather than to go to our beaches or park on our neighborhood roads. Restricting access at Lowry Field, working with the MPD and the police commissioners to step up enforcement patrols, rolling out a lot of signage, which I know some people have also complained about too much signs. And I understand it's kind of annoying perhaps to see a lot of these throughout the community, but they are effective in educating people with policies. And then also identifying some of our streets as residents only parking because of some of the safety issues and the parking activities that were going on, particularly on the weekends around the beach community. So that's just real quick of all the different work that's been going on a weekly basis. We kind of troubleshoot it. And then we did a few other things starting this weekend. We're always learning from the community about, people getting in before the gates are staffed, and just making sure the quality of life restrictions are being enforced down at East Wharf Beach in particular. There've been some issues with there. So, and part of this is also, and this is really hard to see, this is an updated spreadsheet that Beach and Rec has been tracking both. Now they've started tracking walk-ins on the beach as well as cars, and tracking people who are turning away, who they're turning away at the gates because they don't have a residence pass. And so I think I showed this to the board last week. This is also available online. This is an updated version of that, includes this weekend. But I think it shows that we kind of all of a sudden saw this surge happen around the weekend of July 11th that kind of created a particularly alarming situation where we felt we had to start actually monitoring the capacity at our beaches and the number of people on there, that social distancing was becoming problematic and that we're going to have to start putting in restrictions. So, you know, so this data is it, you know, show any different trends from what we talked about last week? I would arguably say, I think things have gone down a little bit, even more. We can see a little bit of a downward trend. But I think we're just kind of in a steady state right now. It's hot. It was brutal this weekend in terms of heat. And I know, is Scott Erskine on the call, Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, Scott. So, you know, if you just want to give a brief summary about how this weekend worked was for the board, and some of the takeaways you had. I know we talked a lot about this last week, so just, you know, something brief would help just to see if we continue to see any changes or issues.
Sure. We increased our signage and changed it quite a bit to discourage drop-offs at the 3 beaches. We saw a positive end to that to an extent. People were not at East Wharf, they weren't dropping off in the intersection, but we found that they were finding different areas to drop off, unfortunately. So we have to kind of deal with that because I think it may be affecting the neighborhoods a little bit. The police have been great going through, but I heard some instances that there was a family with like 3 cars on Madison Avenue that was unloading in front of a house, and obviously that's one that they ended up walking in, but we obviously didn't see the car, so we didn't know where they came from. But I think we have to look at those smaller streets with the police. But police presence was really great. Public was very receptive to what we have in place as far as staff goes, and happy to see our enforcement. We've been able to keep the numbers down. We had an interesting tide this weekend as it was low and then coming back in the afternoon. So we really had to keep a watch on all 3 areas as far as our numbers, but we were guarded in that respect and closed for periods where people would eventually leave and our numbers would drop down. So we were able to maintain the social distancing, which is our ultimate goal. But I think it all went well. People are receptive to what we're doing. Can we make changes going forward? I think we still have to tweak it through the rest of the season. Hopefully the state of Connecticut helps us even more by opening up more of their park because we're getting the hit more so than the other towns.
What's the percentage right now, Scott, of HAMO? Is it, are we hearing, is it still 25% or under 50% capacity?
It's under 50%, I believe, right, Peggy? They're still at that.
Yeah, I mean, they were telling us that they were doing 25 to 30%, and that's been their status quo throughout the summer. In speaking to Chief Drum this morning, he thinks they might have opened up some more spaces, although we don't have any verification of that. I mean, so that might have helped us a bit. I think that, you know, it's a beach at 2 o'clock on a Sunday, you know, when it's 95 degrees outside. There's just a high demand. And I think the other thing is the tide. It was a learning experience for me because I was visiting the beaches multiple times last weekend and this weekend, and to see how the tides affect capacity and also what time of day. So when you have high tide at 2 o'clock on a hot Sunday, that doesn't leave you a lot of beach to allow a lot of people on. You're going to be turning people away. But, you know, if you have high tide at, you know, in the morning when no one's there, and it's low tide in the afternoon, then, you know, you have the ability to allow more people onto the beach. So we're just trying to adapt. And Scott put a new supervisor down there who did a great job this weekend, interacting with the public and overseeing that. And I think our strategy was, this is not something the gate staff should be making those calls on. It should be somebody in a more supervisory capacity. So I think that's really helped out the situation, so that the kids aren't getting, the brunt of it, so to speak. So.
Do you know what the capacity is for each of the beaches, Scott, off the top of your head?
It really varies upon the tide.
Generally?
We've been playing with the numbers, because we have a formula, and the formula is being used by other towns, and then the other towns are playing with it, to see. But we're around 200 at East Wharf, around 300 at Surf Club, and West Wharf obviously is the lowest because of the small beach area.
And some of it depends on how people are spaced out. If you might have a lot of people ending up sitting on the wharf itself, so we came up with some ranges, and we started, I will say the numbers were a lot lower the first weekend when we first got there, and then we started really watching. And once you can visualize, you have the counter, and you say, okay, that just doesn't seem right. So we kind of adapted to that the first weekend. And then I think this weekend was continually tweaking that, so that we could have some ranges depending on where the tides are. And the surf club is tough because, there's the beach itself, and then there's people that, you can't just go by who's parking in the parking lot, because they could be doing other things throughout the park, sitting out at Garden Point, or, on the skate park, or, so that one's been trickier. And then the walk-in, you can't really monitor walk-ins as easily at Surf Club, because they can come in from so many different other places. Besides,
We are trying to count on the beach. We have it set up as quadrants where we have staff count, so we have a handle on what's going on.
So the turnaways is people that they're cars that you're turning away, right?
Cars and possibly people. If we're closed, we're turning away everybody.
Okay, so turnaways on this sheet could be cars or people or walkers.
Correct.
Okay.
I think most of it is cars.
Which include people.
Fair point. Because it's interesting to look at the numbers, like the turnaway in terms of relative to capacity. It kind of puts it into perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was 199 turnaways at East Wharf when the capacity is only 200. So that's pretty significant.
First beach closest to Hamo.
Yep.
And I think that, they were also closing to people, period, when the parking lot wasn't full sometimes.
Right.
Because that is for East Wharf. There's a very big neighborhood walk-in population there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they've done a good job of keeping down the number of people that we don't have we don't have as much illegal parking anymore, because those are residents only streets, but some people still choose to park in town and walk. But I do think those numbers were a lot lower this weekend than we had seen before. Once you started controlling the drop-offs, because that was becoming a public safety issue. It was a lot of cars pulling into the lot, turning around. And so we've kind of tried to figure out how to manage that better.
What's any just thoughts on sort of observations from the weekend of sort of the smoking, drinking, loud music scenarios? Was it better?
A lot better. We had the weekend before, there was a large group that came in from Manchester to celebrate a birthday, which obviously they were intending to go to Hammonasset, and they got closed out.
Is that the gazebo?
Yeah, they set up an area with food on one of the corner benches to keep it out of the sun. And they were out on the beach the majority of the day, but they did have radios, and they were talked to about turning it down, that it was a quiet beach. But then in the afternoon, they came in to the gazebo to sing happy birthday. So everybody was there for photos and everything. And then they went back out I had to talk to him again about the music, and then I guess after I left at 4, they came back in a little bit. So, but it's all people not knowing all the rules, obviously. So,
But this week one was better, it sounds like.
yes, yep.
Was the capacity down at Hammonasset this weekend, do you know?
They closed at around 11. It's on the sheet here, and they closed at 10:50 on Sunday.
Ah.
And I don't know if they closed on Saturday or not
I think they did.
at some point.
They did, yeah, because I remember I get the alerts from dispatch. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they did. And that's usually around the time. It's between 10 and 12. And then we see a flurry, from starting around noon to 2 o'clock. And Sundays tend to be a bigger flurry than Saturdays. So there is a pattern. So I know we've talked a lot about this, but that's kind of where we are on the beaches. Any other questions from the board? No? Okay. Okay, great. So we'll move on to number 10, which is perfect for Scott again. Discuss and take action to approve waiving the bid requirements for the reanalysis of Garvin Point bulkhead project. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And-
Second,
Okay, Scott, if you want to explain that this is a little bit kind of an
Sure.
update of the project we'd already started, so.
Sure. This project is in CIP, has been for a number of years, and there was a study completed in 2014 analyzing the bulkhead and its condition when Mike Ott was still Director of Public Works. And it's coming up to, we've been pushing it off because the steel has been holding up. And unfortunately, this past year with the sea level rise and the storms that we've been seeing and the timing of the storms, we've been seeing an oversplash on the point, which in turn, I'm not saying that the wall is failing, but it backwashed and went in between the cement wall that's all along Surf Club Beach and the sheet metal pile. So we have it in the CIP for a reanalysis, and sorry, stop. Race Environmental performed that study in 2014. I reached out to them again, and they've given me this proposal to reanalyze, and in talking with them, it was felt that we want to go with the concave concrete wall at the point, because the revetment isn't really holding up, and the concave will shove the waves back out into Long Island Sound during a storm, which will help save the point. So this study is to do borings, geotechnical work, and a reanalysis and a price projection for us to move forward in CIP with a roundabout price. And I'm sure Scott and Bruce know where the price is, and it's going to be substantially more than that, because that was based on a 2014 price. So,
Scott, is this, you want to award this bid again because these folks have the prior experience and don't have to?
yes, they have all the data that another firm would need. So we felt it was easier having them do it. Instead of reinventing the wheel, they have a lot of data that they can jump from and get a new price and work. And the crane work for the moorings is an hourly in the quote. So if my dog's being a pain, I'm sorry. Hold on a second, please.
Real life.
No one can read his lips.
I think she needs to go out. But in retrospect, what it is that they had given us a base price of $7,200 for the crane work for the borings. And when I discussed this with Harkin Engineering, who I use a lot, he said, we'll see if you can get an hourly because it may not take all day to do 3 borings. So we'll get that area done for a lot cheaper. So hopefully it'll come in lower than that 21,000. I believe in CIP we have 30,000 or so for study money.
Seems
That's
like
right.
good logic to use the same vendor.
I'm open.
Okay, any more questions for Scott on this? It's obviously an important project for one of our most important assets in town. No more questions? Okay, all in favor of approving, of waiving the bid requirements for the reanalysis of Garvin Point bulkhead project, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right,
Thank
Scott,
you.
go for
Thank
it.
you.
Okay,
Go walk
great.
the
Will
dog.
do.
Scott.
Will do.
Okay. I guess next point is item number 11, discuss a recommendation from the Economic Development Commission to modify the current tax incentive policy adopted by the Board of Selectmen on May 29th, 2018. Okay. We have Ryan Duquesne here. Ryan, please brief the board.
Ryan, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I wanted to thank the board for the approving the Bradley Road sidewalk project. That's something that actually we started back in 2016 as a TOD project with the state. We actually received 2 grants to facilitate that project. The first one was a $400,000 grant in 2016 from the state, which helped renovate the Tux's Walkway. And then we received a $200,000 grant in 2017 for the Bradley Road sidewalk. So those were grants requests that we put in many years ago at this point, but they're paying off, and so it's really exciting to see those come together. And that is to enhance our transportation kind of orientation with downtown and the Tux's Walkway. So thanks for that. Tonight, I just wanted to help move forward an update to a policy that was actually adopted by this board back in 2018. You should have received both the original policy. In fact, I believe Al, Bruce, and Scott, you were actually on the board at the time this policy was originally adopted by the board. You also received our updated version, which again, the Economic Development Commission approved on the 14th of May. I just wanted to point out there's really 3 major updates to this, and the updates are to help to basically make the policy and procedures more understandable to the public and to align with the goals that the Economic Development Commission has to grow Grand List. And so if you note, just again, high level in section 3, there's an eligibility criteria. This eligibility criteria, we increased from $175,000 to $250,000. Again, this aligns with our goal to grow Grand List. And then we also, in section 4, updated the way the incentive awards work. And we created a tier system. So those that are investing more in the town of Madison are potentially rewarded more by deferring the incremental increase in their property tax. And finally, in section 5, we updated the procedures to be a bit more detailed so that those that are applying for this policy have the understanding of exactly how the process works. As for those that don't remember this policy or that are new to the board, this policy takes advantage of statute that'll defer incremental tax increase on commercial property. So if somebody commercially and they tax for you,
Ryan, we're hearing like
a
every third
major
word.
prop
You're not, yeah.
Okay. Sure. Let me
You just kill your video for a sec.
perhaps if I stop my yeah. So the incremental tax is what is deferred in this policy. This isn't reducing any taxes. This is not making any grants to commercial property owners. It's just the incremental tax portion. So with that, I'll take any questions on this policy.
I have a couple. In section 3, the original document had a jobs provision in it, did it not?
It did, Bruce. And the reason that we removed that was because it was determined that it was extremely difficult to measure that in any way. And we didn't want to include something into this policy that we weren't going to be able to measure.
Ryan, how is this policy working? How effective is it? Do you think it is actually carrying out the tasks that we had originally hoped it would, which is attracting new investment in town?
Yeah, it's a good question, Al. And one of the reasons that we decided to review this policy at this time was because we've had kind of a lack of kind of.
And he's gone.
So I think that, you know, one of the things that we wanted to do through this update was to essentially make it a little bit more understandable in terms of what a potential developer may get if they take advantage of this policy, and almost more importantly, how do they go about taking advantage of it? What is the process that's involved? And there's an important element to that, which is worth mentioning at this point. This actually requires a town meeting to approve this. The state statute requires that this policy is approved by the legislative body of each town, and in our case, that's town meeting. We're not able to hold a town meeting right now. We actually do have 2 developers that are interested in, but unfortunately, we're not quite sure how to advise them on next steps. So we're waiting anxiously to find out how a town meeting could be held, or when it could be, when we may be able to do that.
I'm just curious because this was just done, I guess 2 years ago. I mean, what propelled you to update? When you say update it, I mean, was there a specific case where you kind of were able to troubleshoot it and realize the policy needed to be adapted, or was there some additional guidance that came out of the state on these types of policies that we weren't following? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah, you know, essentially, we wanted to, number one, as I described, we wanted to update the policy to help kind of as a catalyst for use. So we wanted to make it more clear to potential developers. Also, this past November, we had 2 new members join the commission, and as part of that process, we were reviewing some of what we consider the tools in our tool chest, and at their suggestion, they wanted to update the policy. And really, I think their interest in updating the policy was also to ensure that we were aligning the goals of the Economic Development Commission to grow the grand list with this policy. And you'll see that again in section 3A, where we've increased it from $175,000 to $250,000 growth.
Okay, great.
So prior to this revision, Ryan, had we had any takers at this point? I just want to make sure I understand that.
We do have 2 developers that are kind of waiting in the wings at this point, hoping to take advantage of it. I'll leave it up to to town staff to figure out which policy they will fall under, because they have officially expressed interest, but they have not yet been able to take advantage of it.
So, okay, so this might be a problematic in terms of switching policies in the middle of the game. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the policy is not switching, and again, this is guidance. This is state statute governs the town's ability to offer the type of deferment. This is simply guidance, but the guidance is slightly different, as is spelled out in the eligibility requirements and the way that the incentive awards are kind of tiered. But state statute officially governs what the town is capable of doing. Technically, anybody could, any commercial developer could make a request under that state statute today. We would not need a policy to govern it. This policy sets the tone that the town is interested in commercial development. But it doesn't. This isn't the authorizing document. State statute authorizes it.
But
So
given
I-
it's just guidance, is it even needed, Ryan, at this
Because
point?
it's an ordinance, so, or no, it's a program policy. Is it?
It's not.
Not an ordinance, but
Yeah, it's not an
yeah,
ordinance. No.
yeah, but
It's just a
Yeah.
policy.
policy.
Scott, many other communities, including North Branford, have policies like this. Again, it kind of demonstrates that the town open and interested in cultivating commercial development to grow the grand list. So with my Economic Development Commission hat on, I would say, yes, absolutely. It's imperative that we have a policy like this that demonstrates we are interested in commercial growth.
Yeah, I guess my only reaction to that, though, Ryan, candidly, is in the last 2 years, it sounds like we've only had 2 potentially interested, and it hasn't really attracted any new business at this point. So I guess I'm just questioning the need for it if it's not doing its stated purpose.
Well, I think that part of our roles as stewards of this process is to actively kind of educate developers, not only those commercial property owners here in town that we wish to make improvements upon their properties, but also outside developers that we want to entice to come to our town. I think it's all of our roles to make sure we do that. I think by bringing this forward this evening, that's one step in doing that. We are further publicizing the fact that we have this policy in place and we want developers to take advantage of it. Additionally, I'm not sure if you know how much Peggy's communicated with the board, but we're looking into other options as well to grow our economic development outreach efforts, and we're looking at a regional approach to do so.
Thanks, Ryan.
But without any tools in the tool chest, it's difficult. This is often a conversation starter.
Fair.
Yeah, and I just want to sort of pick up on Ryan's point because it was very much at the heart of the discussion we had a few years ago, which is this is a proactive signal that Madison is aware of these types of programs and willing to consider them. The policy that's in place and this proposed revision isn't necessarily binding on the town or the Board of Selectmen. I think, as Ryan has alluded, a company or a business could come in today in the absence of a policy and ask to avail themselves of the state statute. This then serves as a bit of a marketing piece. It's a way for us to reach out into the business community and say, hey, we're already thinking about this. And a business could come in and say, look, we like your policy, it's great. We have a few suggestions that we'd like to maybe have you consider for our particular case. And even inside of this policy, we would be free to consider them. So we're not bound to these as a hard and fast rule. I think if it precipitates conversations and maybe moves a potential business to Madison over a competing town, then it will have served its purpose.
That's
did-
exactly right.
Yeah.
And it sets the tone. And I think that, in absence of a policy like this, developers may guess whether or not we're interested in reasonable and responsible commercial development, which of course we are here in town. So I think by putting a policy in place, we ensure that we're sending the right signals.
Well,
to
and
get-
I think that, the one thing, at least since, I've joined the board, is to have that kind of dialogue about what is our economic development strategy and what are our goals and objectives. I know that, some of my board members here have been part of that discussion, but, I think it would be helpful maybe at our next meeting to talk a little bit more about that and what our strategy is, so that if we're going to be, approving policies going forward that are incentivizing, let's just make sure they're in line with what the board wants to achieve with this and the Economic Development Commission wants to achieve. And I know a lot of work has been done on this by the EDC. So maybe it's an opportunity to come and talk a little bit more about that, about what goals and objectives you've been operating under, so that we can understand how that aligns with, the overall objectives of the town. So maybe we could try to make that happen either in August or September.
We would like the opportunity, and I think in its simplest form, our role is to grow the grand list here in town and increase our vibrancy. That is it in its simplest form, but absolutely would love to discuss that further. Also, a year ago, CERC, which is now Advanced CT, actually produced a 5-year strategic plan for the Economic Development Commission with input from this board and Chamber of Commerce members and many other here in the town of Madison. So I believe that's on our website, but I'll also make sure that each of you get a copy of that as well in advance. There is a 5-year strategic plan that we are operating under.
Okay, great. Well, that'll be a good opportunity to maybe get it out in front of the public again. And as we try to focus on normal things rather than COVID things, right?
I just have one other question, Peggy. Ryan, as over the last couple of years, did we receive any feedback from developers that would sort of let us down this path? I mean, it sounded like the way you teed it up, it was the 2 new members that joined EDC and sort of spawned some conversation about this, but was there any specific, market-based feedback that is sort of helping to drive, this change?
The policy actually came out of a meeting that David Anderson and I had probably about 3 or 4 years ago with a major employer here in Madison that was looking for anything, any bone that we could throw them that they could demonstrate to their investors of why they should continue to invest in space in Madison. And at that meeting, actually, we had representatives from DECD as well as other elected officials here from the town of Madison. And we left that meeting scratching our head, trying to figure out, what do we have in our toolbox to at least demonstrate that we're interested in their continued growth in Madison, and the answer at that point was nothing. And so the research that David Anderson did at that time found the state statute which allowed for us to create this policy. Again, this policy is an opportunity for a company like that to go back to investors and say, this community does want us here. These are the types of programs that they're willing to look at to help us to grow.
Okay. I guess with that, this was just a discussion and we'll look forward to more discussions on it. So thank you, Ryan.
Well, no, I think we're actually bringing this forward for approval tonight. We actually discussed this a couple meetings ago.
Well, the agenda item doesn't say that. It says discuss a recommendation. And I don't feel that I'm prepared to vote on this tonight. I wasn't planning on it.
Okay.
Then we can certainly, given knowing that we're kind of in a predicament anyways, because ultimately anything that we would be doing with any type of applicants, is months-long process. But we can certainly put it on the agenda for the next meeting and have it be a take action item.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. Whatever
Okay.
is easiest for you.
Okay. Okay, moving on to item 12. Thank you. Review emergency operations with Town Attorney Floyd Dugas. I think Floyd is joining us and Sam is here. And so I think from the public's standpoint, we had at our last meeting last Tuesday, we were renewing our 21-day emergency declaration that we've been kind of routinely doing throughout the COVID crisis. And some board members had some specific questions about the, I guess, the legality, as well as just the need in terms of kind of continuing to operate under an emergency declaration right now, given we're kind of in a status quo state right now, which, we all understand, and it's the overused term, the new normal. But also we're just on uncharted territory. So we had a lively discussion, and I know that the two of our board members had specific legal questions and wanted to vet them with the town attorney. So I will turn it over to Floyd. I know they submitted some questions in advance, and Floyd.
Hi, hi, folks. How's everybody doing?
I just want to know, Floyd, do you wear that suit at home all the time too? Is that?
I am, although I like Sam's backdrop the best.
Much better. Like Gilligan's Island over there.
Although Alice is pretty funny behind him too. So let me just give a quick summary of the statutory and then the charter authority, and then because I think that'll help in some of the questions that came at us. So the first thing that really is sort of overarching power and authority and grant of authority, if you will, is Connecticut General Statutes 28-8A. And what that says is that, and I'm going to paraphrase, the first selectman or designee is empowered to take such action as she deems necessary to mitigate the major disaster or emergency. And then there's definitions of the major disaster or emergency that I think most people are pretty comfortable, municipal attorneys around the state, that this situation falls in. And that's what a lot of towns and cities are operating under who don't even have charter provision as you do. But that certainly is the broad grant of authority. The other thing, of course, is the charter, and there are a couple of provisions in the charter, but the operative one is that the one that says, upon a finding that a state of emergency exists in the town pursuant to 4.1.4K, which is what the Board of Selectmen must do to initiate the state of emergency, in which you've done. It then says the Board of Selectmen may enact such ordinance or regulations as it deems necessary under the circumstances. And then there's another provision, which is 4.2.1, that talks about the general powers of the first selectman. And among the general powers of the first selectman is that she shall serve as the official head of the town for all ceremonial purposes and for emergency purposes. Okay, so those are the broad grants of authority. And so in turning to the questions, and I'm not sure which order they came in, so I'll try to tackle them in the order that I have them here. But the one question that came up, and I think this may have been Al's, is how will we recognize the moment when we no longer need to operate the governance structure under the emergency rules? And, there's a couple answers to that, one of which is certainly to look to the state and the federal government, where they've declared a state of emergency, and just defer and look to that. But there's no reason that you have to have it coterminous with what's going on at those two entities. So, for example, if it got to the point where you felt things in Madison had normalized and you didn't need to worry about beaches and parking and people entering the buildings and how do people vote and all those sorts of things, you certainly could lift it. But it is certainly, particularly where we have all the restrictions we have at the state level right now, in terms of gatherings and public meetings and so forth, it is certainly an effective tool for getting things done when, in response to the emergency, when all other means are not available. So I don't know if that answers the question. If anybody wants to follow up on that, the proposer of the question.
So Floyd, in your opinion, the indicators you've just identified, we have not achieved yet as a society. None of those indicators have yet materialized.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, because again, your hands are largely tied by executive orders that remain in place from the governor, and presumably will remain in place as long as the state of emergency is pending. So again, it's a tool for continuing to move forward with the governments of the town.
Thank you.
The next one I have here is, what is the direct impact of not renewing the emergency declaration? And, you know, I think it's part and parcel of what I just said, because what it allows you to do is to manage the town in ways that you otherwise couldn't manage the town. So you know, Civics 101, you know, the federal government is supposed to regulate those things over which it has authority and jurisdiction. The state government is supposed to, you know, legislate around those things it has jurisdiction over. And certainly one could argue that even our governor has overstepped his bounds with some of the things he's done. But, you know, at the end of the day, there are things that neither the state or federal government has control over or can regulate, you know, specifically issues that relate to the management of the town again. And so if you didn't have the emergency declaration, you know, it certainly would not allow the first select woman to put emergency orders in place to deal with, I don't want to call them mundane, but, you know, very practical sort of issues that have popped up most recently, obviously, around the beach situation.
So can I just follow up, Floyd? So the state statute then does not provide absolute authority to the first selectman. It has to come under a vote by the board voting for a
No,
voting.
actually, I'm sorry, Aaron. The state statute is absolute in giving that power to the first selectman, first select woman in this case. But what I would argue is, if anything, your charter sort of modifies it to some degree, and for example, provides a vehicle where the Board of Selectmen, in theory, could enact ordinances around the issue too.
Well, I think that's part of my confusion, is that the charter seems to lay out a path for the Board of Selectmen to conduct business during a state of emergency, but the emergency operations plan and the statutes that it refers to reads to me as if the emergency operations group can themselves declare an emergency without the Board of Selectmen.
I haven't looked at that particular question, frankly. But I do recall there is a reference in the statute to their ability to do that. I don't know whether they've done that, and certainly you all have done that. But what I think that does is it just triggers the emergency operation plan, as opposed to addressing some of the management issues of the town.
And maybe, you know, my bigger point is has the charter overstepped in matters of emergency? And is that part of the confusion? I think of the charter as the town's constitution, but has it overstepped in this particular matter?
I don't see it that way, because, you know, again, the charter covers matters of strictly local concern, right? And that is a much broader, that's a different subset and category than the things covered under the emergency operation plan. So it allows you to operate town government during an emergency, which is what we're doing. Okay.
But it doesn't speak to executive authority. The charter contemplates the board taking actions.
Well, again, we start with the state statute. The state statute gives extremely broad authority to the first selectman in the case of an emergency. Then we've got the charter, and I would say that the charter does two things. I mean, first of all, it empowers the Board of Selectmen and only the Board of Selectmen with the authority to declare emergency. Once you've done that, there are two avenues you can go. One of which is through, and I cited the broad powers of the first selectman. They have the first selectman issue executive orders. It doesn't specifically say that, but that's how executives operate, and manage the town during the emergency in that way. Alternatively, you could in fact pass ordinances that would allow you to do that. It's complicated, obviously, by the role and distinction between the town meeting and the Board of Selectmen when it comes to enacting ordinances. But if you have, I believe it's 4 out of the 5 of you are in agreement to pass an ordinance, you can do that. And
Actually, we don't even need that. And
do.
it's just a quorum of whoever is in the meeting. It's not a quorum of the 5 of us.
I think it says if the reasonable attempt has been made to
Yeah.
get a quorum, you can't.
Yeah, I thought that was in the absence of the first.
Sufficiently vague.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in any event, that is certainly a vehicle. We could get a little more specific about how you would need to do that, but that is an avenue within the charter.
And then hasn't the governor, through at least 2 of his executive orders, given us procedural relief on this by waiving the town meeting requirements? I think it was.
Yeah, when it comes to approval of the budget, and also there was another one that was a little bit more broad about entering into contracts and things of that nature, but they were very limited.
Floyd, if we were to be revising our charter at this point in time, would you be suggesting any clarifications that should be made?
Yeah, well, certainly, Al, this question of the Board of Selectmen through ordinance versus the first selectman, because the provision that talks about the ordinance in the first selectman only talks about the acting first selectman in their absence, and then the powers of the first selectman are in that different section, which makes no sense. It'd be better to streamline it for clarity. Who is it, or is it both, or what's the process?
Right, because I don't read 421 that same way, because I throughout that paragraph you see repeated references to the first select person carrying out, you see approval based on approval by the board, based on approval by the board. I mean, that's like throughout that paragraph. So I agree, Floyd. I think if that's going to be the intent, it needs to be spelled out clearer in that that 10 point whatever
One
other
more. Yeah.
Yes, 10.13. 10.13.
Oh, okay, right.
I'm still a little confused, Floyd, based on the conversations that we've had previously, because I guess the inability to have a town meeting, I thought, prohibited the Board of Selectmen from creating ordinances. So that's why I'm a little still, because I know some town councils have done, ordinance they've passed emergency ordinances, but they are town council form of government. So the representative versus having a town meeting form of government. So I always thought that this was kind of the path that we've been operating on since May. So I guess I'm a little confused that you're talking about an alternative path, which I thought all along that was not something that we were able to pursue.
I don't remember. I mean, we certainly had the conversation about the town meeting to enact ordinances, but there is a provision in the charter that it's 10.1.1 that says the Board of Selectmen may enact ordinances upon affirmative vote of 4 of the members. So that's just an alternative vehicle. It's obviously not as streamlined as the authority in the first selectman. Right. But in terms of an option, that is an option that's available.
But isn't an ordinance something that's more permanent in terms of a decision, as opposed to an executive order that would be relieved via the executive order?
Absolutely.
So
right?
that seems to be a distinct difference then.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But
But
no, when the board takes action under the emergency, it has the same effect as this. In other words, we can take emergency action on an ordinance that then expires when the emergency is over, or if we earlier terminate it.
As long as you specify in the ordinance, but I guess my point is the ordinance would go in until it's relieved, unless if there's no expiration date, it would continue on.
No. And by definition, an ordinance that we do without town meeting under a state of emergency would expire according to the charter.
When it's relieved.
When that state of emergency
Is that true, Floyd?
Yeah, you certainly could have an ordinance that had a sunset provision in it, and you could address it that way. But again, I think, much of, what happened in the town was not so much, that took place in terms of the beaches and so forth, was not so much, a classical ordinance as much as it was a regulation, if you would. It might be too fine of a distinction, but that's the way I kind of viewed it.
Right. And then the governor's executive order that I was referring to, 7, it was JJ, is titled The Allowance of Suspension of In-Person Voting Requirements by Members of the Public for Critical and Time-Sensitive Municipal Decisions. And it goes on to say the Board of Selectmen, in order to avoid endangering the public health and welfare, may adopt or amend ordinances or resolutions as necessary. So I think we've got a couple of sort of parallel conversations going on at the same time. First and foremost, my concern is that this EOP does not dovetail into the charter, or the charter does not dovetail into it as well as it could. And that in and of itself is creating some confusion. In fairness to the creators of the EOP, both at the national level and then the customization of it to the town, nobody was thinking about this, right? We were thinking about hurricanes and floods and fires.
Well,
right?
the pandemic is not even mentioned in our local emergency operations.
Well, that was sort of Sam's point the last time, right? It was meant for a 2-week window, if that, right?
Right.
Max.
Well, but the pandemic was not part of that planning process when that was written.
And then the second theme for me is moving through this sort of acute late winter, early spring. We don't know what we're up against scenario. I think we did everything right in those days, but moving forward, as we seek some sort of normalcy, we need to find a path to move away from the executive order style of government that we've got. I do not wish to diminish Peggy's or any sitting first select person's authority to act on the spot for those things that are truly time critical, need an answer today, something has to happen. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about some of these plans that we're beginning to lay and policies that we're making, even if they're only for a matter of weeks or months, that we get back to some more collaborative Board of Selectmen form of problem solving.
Well, I think that one of the thoughts I had after our discussion last week, Bruce, because I think those are all important things, right? Because we are recognizing we're getting into needing to address some problems that we could just put off to the side for a while. We're in COVID land, right? We've got to focus on very near-term emergencies and issues. And so I think that there are a lot of important issues now that aren't going to go away. They have to be resolved. Even the discussion we had earlier with the economic development, strategy, or any policies or procedures we have. But I think also that time is of the essence oftentimes with this COVID situation. And my thought was trying to establish a more regular meeting pattern, because I think one of the things is trying to pull meetings together is oftentimes can be problematic. Everybody here is busy professionals and have a lot of other commitments. And my thought was having actually a weekly special meeting where we would provide some sort of opportunity, get it on the calendar, have it set. The agenda only needs to be posted 24 hours in advance. So it's just there and it's set. And if things of an urgent nature need to come up, obviously if it's emergency, we would do an emergency meeting, but have it more of a regular patterned thing. And then as I think the next 2 months, it's going to keep evolving, right? Everything that's happening. That way the board is always on top of everything we do. We meet, the emergency operations meets once a week. And that way the board is apprised of everything coming out of emergency operations. And if there is kind of policies or things that need to be done in town government that the board wants to weigh into, and if there's this view that it should be done through an ordinance. And I don't think anything that we've done so far, in my view, would rise to the occasion of needing an ordinance. But, certainly, moving forward, if the board wants to have that kind of dialogue and decide that's the right action to take, I think, that's the right thing to do, because these are big issues. And especially some of the beach policies, we're going against years of precedents about how we've operated our beaches because of, whether it's the legal concerns that we've had and also just management issues that we've had. I think it's important that the entire board supports some of these actions that we take. And who knows what problem could arise, in September, depending on what happens with the schools opening and the virus and more travel quarantine requirements. And so there's a lot of still uncertainty. And I think that was the argument I was trying to make last week, was that we're still in a state of unknown, and we still need the ability to respond quickly to concerns. I don't want to downplay the FEMA issue, to be honest, because there are a number of expenses that we've incurred that are specifically related to Madison-specific problems. And that has a lot to do with some of the extra costs we've incurred at the beaches, some of the things we've had to do because of Hammonasset. They're very much driven by COVID, but it's not like ordering face masks and sterilization equipment or things like that. So I feel it's important to have all the documentation that we need to support any kind of reimbursement that we would be submitting. And so I think that the ability to act quickly, if we had a more regular, frequent meeting schedule that would allow the board to weigh in on some of these more urgent matters, I think would be helpful. So that was a thought I had, so it's just that way you can just plan for it. This is the time every week you're going to get updated. And then if it's going to be, a true emergency, one would hope that, we just need to take action, which we had to do, in March when this all hit. And, we were all wondering how to react to this, like what are the right things to do? So those are some of my thoughts. I think that, the emergency, the state expires September 9th. I don't know if the governor is going to extend it or not. I think that's definitely, everybody's taking bets on that, Floyd, and I don't know if you have a strong view.
Absolutely.
But, we do have to get business done. And we were talking about this last week in town hall about we've got to figure out a way to do a town meeting that falls within the guidelines that we're living under. And we've got a couple of ideas that Lauren has been working on this, and we've talked to Art Sickle, and because we can't just stay in the status quo forever. We've got to start taking action and being able to accomplish things. And so, ideally, some things I think we really need to bring to the public, if they're not in the, a necessity of an emergency.
Well, and one of our big indicators from COVID has been the HAMO challenges with volume restrictions, and that will go away come September. So that our beach situation will change.
Right.
Except that if we still are in an era when 25 million people don't have jobs and we have nice fall days, I don't, who knows?
They may be
right?
coming to the beach still.
Every day is Saturday this year.
It's Groundhog Day. You're right.
Yeah. Well, and we saw that in
I'm with
May.
you.
That's why we had to put so much staffing and some of these policies in place in May, because it was 4th of July in May, unfortunately, on a nice day.
So Peggy, I welcome your idea. I think getting together more frequently is going to make us better. And I would say right at the outset, we would avail ourselves of the rules afforded us in the charter under an emergency. If we can't have all of us there, you can still have the meeting.
Mhm.
So the other thing you have to be
That'd
aware of.
interesting. One Zoom box.
So if we don't have a local declaration of emergency, we can't ask for assistance from the state or feds.
Right.
Yep, good point.
So if we needed PPE or if we needed food or anything else, equipment, vehicles or something like that, special vehicles, we wouldn't be able to get them unless we have a local state of emergency.
So Clinton.
So why wouldn't a town like Clinton then? Why wouldn't they have a state of? It seems like such a no-brainer where you put it that way. Why would they not have a state of emergency?
I cannot speak for them. I don't know.
I actually called their town manager and I didn't get a call back. I did speak to somebody else, the town council, and they advised that they should have it. That was their view. They're a different situation. I think we have to make the right decisions for us. And I guess the question I would have is, could we still have the state of the declaration, but still continue to do the ordinances the way we discussed?
Yeah, that's how it's contemplated under the charter.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, so we don't have to necessarily give up one to do the other, right? So we can.
Correct.
And just and then try to use, and if there is a time where the board is completely unreachable and there's a situation that has to require executive order, at least the option is there. But I think if we're meeting weekly, we can tackle all these issues and be kind of on top of them, all of us at the same time.
I'm gonna be the annoying one, but I'm not signing up for a 3-hour meeting though every week either. So I mean, we need to have sort of a bound. Well, maybe it's an hour or something. But.
So Scott, you've been attending the other meetings though, right? The emergency meetings.
Most, not all.
Team?
It's usually during my workday, so it's tricky for me sometimes to do. So sometimes Al will jump in or.
Right.
But yes,
I'm just saying
I've
for
attended many of them. Yes.
Right. So for Bruce and I, who haven't attended any of those, not been invited to attend any of those, we don't have all that information you have.
I'm only attending because I'm the acting first selectman. That's why I'm invited to go.
If I got COVID, we needed to have somebody step in.
So it's a role thing more than anything else. Nobody else
you weren't
either.
But you didn't come in as acting when Peggy was gone, right?
No,
was it Al was the
because Al was on it.
Because I was on vacation too. That's why.
So here's the thing. If Scott can't make the meeting, one of the other ones want to jump on, I don't have a problem with that. It's just we can't have 3 selectmen because now it becomes a public meeting.
Floyd, is that true? If we're not,
well, that's a question. Yeah.
Of conducting board business, can we not be in the same meeting?
I'm sorry, Bruce. Say that again, please.
If we were to be a viewer in in that meeting and we weren't getting together to conduct board business, would it be an illegal meeting if we're just being briefed?
You're just being an observer in a meeting? Is that what you're saying?
In the emergency meetings that they have regularly, Floyd, with various staff members.
So we have our emergency operations center update meetings weekly. And I was under the impression that if we have all 5 selectmen there, it's a public meeting and we're not going to discuss any business.
Or three out of 5.
Or even 3 out of 5. Because that constitutes a quorum, correct?
Yeah.
Unless it's 3 of the same party.
Well, right? no, that would have to
be. I don't even think that applies.
Have to be on their own. Generally speaking, if you have a quorum of the board, and they're conducting town business, then you have to comply with posting and notice and everything else. If they're sitting there observing a meeting and not participating, then that's different.
Floyd, is there an exception under the FOI statute to have a executive session for emergency matters?
Absolutely.
Peggy, I'd like to react to your suggestion. I think it would be a wonderful idea if we got together regularly. During prior emergencies, going back 10 years, which were hurricane related, those emergencies were of relatively short duration. And so this didn't become an issue. And I think we're learning as we go along here that in a longer drawn out emergency period, it would be good to have a mechanism to make sure the entire Board of Selectmen is up to date on all the issues that are coming up.
And I'm happy to forward all the citizen complaints on a regular basis to everybody.
They weren't all complaints. Some of them are compliments, actually.
There were a
You
few.
don't have to forward the phone calls yet.
No,
can
I
take the
think,
phone calls, Bruce.
I think just we're at that stage, we're at that point. I think we were all hoping, the original executive order on the beaches was the end of July. We were all hoping that we were going to be beyond phase 3, going into phase 4, or possibly done with this when we originally started getting into our kind of modus operandi. And so I think it warrants it, considering I think there's a real risk that this is going to continue through the end of the year. We need to start conducting more business. And I think the important thing is having the board supportive of some of the decisions that, it's a burden to do executive orders, right? Because it's not a task that one looks forward to. You're doing something that is trying to address a problem rapidly and quickly. So I think if we, do a weekly an update meeting, and I'll speak to Floyd and Lauren about how this would work in terms of the agendas, the flexibility of the agendas, and posting them 24 hours notice, all this other stuff. If we can work some of those handcuffs that often create problems, in terms of FOI requirements, then I think we could at least have that weekly consistency.
But the intent of that meeting is more status update, not necessarily acting, correct? Because it's a standing agenda. Is that the
No.
intent?
Well,
It sounded like she said an opportunity to weigh in, which is what I was actually thought was the best part of what you said.
No, I think the idea is that, if there's a need to take action, that we would use that scheduled time to do so. And especially if something that, in my view, and in all of our views, that would rise to the occasion that we would have to pass an ordinance 4-1 and bypass our normal way of doing ordinances, so, that's that to me. And then I think by enabling at least to continue to renew the emergency declaration, we offer the opportunity at least to pull the executive order out when we need it, when we can't do the ordinance route, right? So that way we kind of have the best of both worlds, right? So
I make one additional suggestion, just in the spirit of not having too many meetings. Given that we have every 2 weeks a Board of Selectmen meeting anyways, could we just do the alternate Tuesday or whatever day we're going to decide, so that there's a meeting every week? But I don't think we need some weeks where we have 2 meetings, a Monday and a Tuesday. That seems excessive.
But I mean, not everyone has to be there, Scott.
Well,
So
I'm going to commit
you
to
can't
coming.
make it.
If we make a meeting, I'm going to commit to come, especially if we're going to potentially be acting, Aaron. It doesn't make sense.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're already attending the other one, Scott, there might be times where it's not necessary if you have a work obligation not to have
It has
to
nothing to do
attend
with
it.
a work obligation. It's potentially a family obligation, but it's the point of having 2 meetings in 1 week.
Well,
I don't know. It was an idea. You may not like
yeah,
it.
no, I understand. I mean, I guess I'm coming from a perspective of not feeling like I've really been, having a good understanding what's going on, which has been a little bit challenging for me, having people in town asking me questions and really not being able to answer them or say, I have any role in doing anything. So, I mean, I agree. I mean, I'm with you, Scott. We talk about this all the time. It's hard to manage everything. But I think during this time, I would like to start with what Peggy suggested, and then perhaps we find that it's not necessary to meet that often.
I think that it'll be as everything throughout this period.
Fluid.
fluid and we'll learn as we go, right? So, because I think there will be weeks I'll sit there and go, well, nothing changed since 2 nights ago, but we,
The other thing I could suggest is what if we alternate an additional select person each week? So Bruce 1 week, Scott, Aaron, Al, and the EOC update meeting.
Fine with me because it's during the workday, so I'm totally fine with that.
So Floyd, maybe I could just ask you to put a fine point on it. If we are in the meeting just simply receiving information, is it okay for the 5 of us to be in that EOP meeting?
So I just pulled up the statute and looked at the definition of a meeting. And what I said only applies if you're at another duly noticed meeting of a public agency, like if it were the Board of Finance, where in a situation like this, where it's not a, an agency, you would have to post it if there's a quorum.
but I think that, Sam, that's a great idea though. What if we just rotated it? I mean, I think once you listen in on 1 or 2 of these, you'll understand that a lot of it is routine. And I think also it depends on where we, a month ago, it was a much bigger discussion because there was so much going on, just similar to Bruce is on the long-term recovery committee, right? So you have a couple of like intense weeks where there's just a lot going on, then all of a sudden it ratchets down to kind of mundane things. So I think I'm comfortable with doing that if Scott, because I lead the meetings, well, Sam leads them, they're his meeting, but I am also leading it. But if Scott is comfortable, rotating out, then, I'm happy to we could do that and rotate between Aaron, Bruce and Al, if he wants to rotate into that for the EOCs. And then let's just start with the weekly. I mean, my view was, and this is where we always have, but, to have a 7 o'clock at night meeting is tough. We all have families. I think if we could somehow do a weekly, like a 5 o'clock, and then sometimes you're able to make it, sometimes you're not. And my thought was doing it the same day as the EOC. So the EOC is in the morning and this would be a Tuesday meeting.
What if we did a 7:30 in the morning meeting? Like we do with CIP, just to get it over pre-day, so that we're not taking up more family time.
I think that Lauren would have a heart attack.
I think I'm having one.
Well, I am too. That's why I'm trying to suggest alternatives.
I know. I think that, I would say 8 would be better. These should be short, right? These are little quick updates. And then if there is a major issue, obviously it's going to be longer. But given the fact that since March, we've done 6 executive orders, clearly it's not going to be like every week we're going to be like passing out ordinances like candy. So I think this is just more to make sure that we're all having the right dialogue and understanding what issues the town is facing, right? In this kind of weird state that we're in. And so, and then, maybe Tuesdays and maybe Wednesday, but I'm good 8 a.m. And Lauren, is there a way that, do you have to be on this? Could I run these?
Yeah.
You have to be.
It would have to be me or someone else who has a host license. And so that would be me or Danielle at this point that we have.
And could you do it from home though? And then just come in at like 10 o'clock? I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could do it from home, but then whenever we finish it, I'm not in for another hour after that.
Well, I think that, I'm good with that, but we can, so I don't know, is morning preferable or?
Do you have to take minutes for those update meetings? I mean, that's the only thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a called meeting, there has to be minutes, even at, so I would be on anyways, but
Do we have to allow public comment and all that stuff?
You don't ever have to allow public comment. We just have the precedent here of allowing it twice on one agenda.
So would, so just to get it, I mean, we don't have to decide tonight. Think about it. I think either a Tuesday or a Wednesday, either at 8 a.m. I think 7:30 is pushing it, to be honest, for at least.
Well, if we're going to do it in the morning, we should do it on Wednesday, so it's after our.
Right, that's right. EOC,
group meeting or EOC.
Right, Wednesday, I would say either 8 o'clock or 5 o'clock. and it's just standing. You put it in your calendar, and if you can get there, you can get there. And then we still have our regular Board of Selectmen meetings, and then we can always call other stuff, if we have to. And so maybe email your preferences, and then we'll just nail down something tomorrow. Does that work for everybody? And then Sam will work out a rotation. I'll let Sam, you can figure out the EOC invitation.
Yeah, so you guys just email me which week you want to do, and I'll just put you in. I'll send you the link for that week, and who wants to take week 1, 2, 3, and 4. Doesn't matter to me.
Okay. So I think, does that kind of address a lot of the concerns, at least, that we talked about? And then, we can have a follow-up conversation again, but I think this was all helpful. I think we all learned something on this with Floyd here. Any other questions? Because we still have a couple of other things.
Right, right.
Yeah. All right, Floyd, thank you for your time. I think just, some follow-up questions about how we would work the standing schedule, agenda, notice requirements in the light that we're in a state of emergency, if some of that could be waived at least, so it doesn't handcuff us in some way.
Sure.
Would be helpful.
Okay.
Okay, moving on.
Good night, guys.
All right, thanks a lot, Floyd.
Yeah, good night.
Moving on to the next item was, and I know this was something that Bruce had requested, discuss the 2021, that should say 2022 budget process calendar. I think there's a typo on there. And let me get to the right. So basically we kind of, I lost my screen sharing. I just threw up here, and I'll go back to getting it. Here we go. Bruce, why don't you just raise some of the questions you wanted to answer, and then I can talk a little bit about what I had put in here, which I think is something everybody kind of knows.
Sure. So in a normal year, we do our best to delay meaningful budget conversations until the last possible minute, and then we're meeting on Saturdays in the middle of the winter, trying to get it all settled. Knowing this year was going to be a bit of a challenge for us from a budget planning perspective, I thought that we should do our best to start the conversation early. And I was thinking a little bit less about the operating budget, but I think the operating budget needs to be part of it. I was thinking more of the capital budget and how we've got some policies that we operate under about transmitting the capital budget to the CIP fairly early in the year. And in years past, we've not really had meaningful conversations at the Board of Selectmen level about those projects prior to sending them on to the committee. And I think this year, it would be nice if we could do that, if we could send them a more complete thought so that they're not meeting at 6:30 in the morning like Scott
I love it.
likes to do. Every
I'm
other
going to send Aaron though instead.
5 weeks. So really my motive for getting this conversation started is in the hopes that we can actually get the budget process started earlier this year, recognizing it's going to be a harder budget to create.
Can we talk about the process? Because I think that maybe that's where it sort of all ties back in though, right? Because 7-1 has come and gone, and I'm assuming projects have been submitted, right, to you, Peggy, and then
go through
the prioritization.
Exactly. So the projects have been submitted, and I was chatting a little bit with Stacy about this, because I haven't obviously gone through the full process in this position since November, but and normally by CIP has to go to the boards, I guess, by October 15th. So there's a time period here, August and September, that it sounds like, Bruce, what you'd like to do is have the board actually have a conversation with these projects in a little more detail. My understanding is it's the first select person that typically would kind of go through and review and prioritize these things, but maybe.
And that's what's listed in the transmittal letter, right? When we get it from or
Right.
into CIP, it's coming from the first select woman's office to CIP. But Bruce, are you suggesting there's almost like a step in between that prior to the transmittal letter? Or is it us influencing the transmittal letter?
This is an emerging practice and a developing skill for the town, because this capital process is not that old. We had talked, and certainly Al and Scott, you guys would remember, we talked about how it was a little unsatisfying sometimes to have the capital budget go on to the CIP without the Board of Selectmen having seen it at all. And we talked about playing a larger role, and I'm just continuing that thought. So this is
Okay.
a conversation we had a couple of years ago.
No, and I think that, just so I just wanted to talk a little bit about, because what we've done so far in the budget. I've talked to the departments. They've submitted their CIP requests. I've not reviewed any of those yet. And that's a process I'll start doing. We have started to launch a lot of these studies, that I know the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen was eager to get this information to help through the budgeting process, and CIP is going to need to help prioritize. So those things are in motion. Things got started a little later than one would have hoped because of what was going on with COVID and, just the practicality of doing that. And I know two of these our board members are reviewing right now who's going to do the town facility study. And then there's also, just from an operational standpoint, some of the discussions we've already started having on early retirement incentive programs, organizational structure, things like that we talked at our last meeting in executive session. So there's a lot going on that's going to have an impact on the next year's budget. But in terms of CIP itself, certainly maybe in September, we could just review kind of high level what the project's pipeline looks like, because it's in, right? And I haven't even reviewed it yet. These things were submitted. And I'm talking about town projects, not school projects. I think the school is going to be struggling, and they're starting this process now because of, the fact that the referendum is not moving forward right now on the facilities projects for the schools, and they've got COVID to deal with, right? So they're having to just realign some of their investment objectives. So I guess, we can certainly go through the CIP list and talk about it at one of our meetings. But the bottom line is it's really the 15th, though. I mean, and this is where I'm getting a little, it's basically, it's kind of jumping ahead. I can give you an update on kind of where we are and talk about the projects, which I'm happy to do prior to that submission on the 15th.
Well, can I just pick out what Bruce was saying a little bit, because I know he and I have talked a lot about this in years past. And Bruce, let me just make sure I'm clarifying what you're saying, or I want to make sure I'm understanding it. Are you suggesting, so coming out of that process Peggy just articulated, it's having a prioritized list of projects conveyed to us as the Board of Selectmen, and then we have an opportunity to maybe speak to that and tweak the prioritization a little bit prior to that, then moving over to CIP. Is that kind of where you're heading?
So I have no objection to Peggy presenting a fairly completed thought for us to discuss. I think, the filter that we want to put it through is, do we still think that the assumptions that are driving the plan are valid, or do they require modification? Two, with regards to the new projects, are we satisfied that they're aligned with the town's strategic goals? And then three, I think it gives us a chance, an opportunity as a group to establish a priority for the CIP to consider as they do the hard work of time phasing all of the different projects. So I think there's a real value added to the Board of Selectmen having this conversation and teeing up as best we can for the CIP committee. The capital planning is one of our core roles as a board. It is one of the core reasons we exist. And I've always been uncomfortable with the idea that the CIP develops their list of priorities and hands it back to us to change or to well, I don't want to use a provocative word, but I'll use it anyways, to rubber stamp a plan.
I hear what you're saying. I know what you mean.
So we did a lot of work and we've talked a lot over the last couple of years about the strategic plan and the vision for the town. And I think one of the places the rubber hits the road is, are we putting forth the projects that are consistent with our vision? And then you can overlay the COVID.
And I do executive
Details.
to bond for $25 million.
And yeah, and don't get me wrong, I don't envy the district. I think the school district is just got way too much.
Yeah.
And some things are going to have to take a back seat to their planning and getting the kids educated however they think best and whatever they think safest. But that said, the calendar marches on and we have decisions to make in town. We just can't press the pause button.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think that, I think it's good to, talk about what those objectives are, what those projects are. And we'll, it is kind of a funny, I would agree that I think the process is a little odd that it's handed, but I'm not, I haven't been through it, so I don't know what makes sense, to be honest.
I think it's less important, Peggy, to talk about projects that have been in the CIP flowing through, they were in year 5 last year, now they're 4, 3, 2, 1, et cetera. But anything new, I think those are the ones that are far more important for us to be talking about, because those are going to drop into a year 5 in CIP.
I'd like to add a little bit of history here as well. I'm agreeing with everything that Bruce and Scott have said. I think there was concern in the past about potential new projects which might not have escaped from the first selectman's office and even gotten to CIP. So for me, I'm very interested to see what the first select woman ranks very low on the list and doesn't think ought to go to CIP. And I think that is a proper role of the Board of Selectmen to see not only the ones that rank high, but the ones that rank really low.
Well, and I think that's a good point. And I think the other thing that I think is a little frustrating is the rigidity of these timelines that we put ourselves in with CIP, to be honest. Because, there's kind of this rule like, oh, it has to go into year 5. You don't put anything in year 1. But, as we know, things change rapidly and priorities have to change sometimes. And I felt like a little bit last year, we were allowing the process to drive decisions rather than making good decisions and then using the process to get things done. Right. So I think that that's also a learning curve that we have to, I think it's important to have a good process, but I also think it's important to have flexibility. And so, because you're also binding, you have a change in leadership, and yet there's something that was put in a certain time frame by previous leadership, and now all of a sudden it's stuck there. It's gotten into the process and it has to stay in the process that way. So that's where I'm trying to understand with these timelines, and then also how we're treating bonding projects versus things that were pay as you go. I think that it's clunky putting these massive facility bonding projects in a process that's really set up more for, you know, $500,000 here, $1 million there. So I think that was something just as an observer and kind of going through it for the first time. These are all criticisms of CIP maybe, but it's just more observations based on my first time having gone through it. So I think it's good to discuss more, and then you know, maybe September is probably the best time to maybe at least start talking about some of this stuff and how we're going to handle it. Does that sound good? Does that answer your questions, Bruce? And can we move on to number 14?
Yeah, no,
Well,
absolutely. Absolutely. I just, the clock is ticking. That's all I'm saying.
So it sounds like everyone's on the same page. So I guess what are the next steps?
I think
What are we?
My takeaway was that I think in September, you know, I would come to the board with just this laundry list of projects and we can talk about it, and I can share my thoughts about how I think they should be prioritized, and we can have a conversation about it. Is that what everybody else kind of thought?
Yes.
Yeah,
You got
and
it.
I think to Al's point, you know, having your second list of ones that didn't make the cut.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I, you know, I don't think there's many that didn't make the cut, probably, because I think people have gotten better at figuring out what's going to make sense in CIP and what's not. So that's the impression I get talking, and they've kind of figured the game now out. So when I talk to
They were
staff,
used to hearing no.
yeah.
And so things that are already in there cannot be reprioritized. Once it's in, it's in.
No. No. So everything year 2 and out is subject to negotiation.
Okay.
I think
And even pulling out altogether too.
Right. We've not ceded our role as the capital planning organization. The CIP is a policy of the Board of Finance that allows them to consider the capital budget. The capital budget is still ours.
So we can make those amendments when we submit it to, or I can, I guess, my recommendation to CIP. I can change all those timelines before it gets.
And I would offer that it's much more powerful having those amendments come from the 5 of us.
Yeah, no, but I didn't realize that that was the case, actually. That's what I was saying. I felt a little frustrated that you get this kind of fixed schedule, that sometimes things happen and you got to move things up or swap things out, you know, to address more urgent needs or community demands. So
those can come in form of recommendations in the transmittal letter. Bruce, that's actually an interesting point too. Does the transmittal letter have to be from the first select person, or could it be from the Board of Selectmen? Maybe it's more powerful that way.
I think it can be however we want it to be.
Well, I think though, you got to think the CIP, right? But the CIP includes 2 members of the Board of Selectmen too.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, more to talk about.
Right, but by the time we got on it, it was kind of already well underway. It seemed like.
You mean that the list was sort of fait accompli?
Yeah, it was already, yeah.
Right, because budgeting waits for nobody.
Oh, okay. Okay, so let's just move on. Now we have another, oh my goodness. All right, item number 14, if we can. Moving on to appointments and resignations. And I guess, I forget how to do this. It's a motion to approve. And should I go through each of these? The appointments, these are all appointments, right? And one
Just
resignation.
read them all and we can bundle them in one.
Okay, a motion to approve the following appointments and resignations. Carol Snow to the Historic District Commission alternates for a term to expire January 1st, 2024. Barbara Yeager to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee alternates for a term to expire January 1st, 2021. Rachel Salvo to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee alternates for a term to expire January 1, 2024. And the resignation of Frank
Garaccio.
Garaccio from the Conservation Commission. Can I have a second or a motion in a second?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Well, first of all, obviously, thank you very much, Frank, for your service. We always, it's sad to see people move on. And then thank you for the other attendees, Carol, Barbara, and Rachel, for stepping up to serve on our board and commission in town. We always appreciate volunteerism. So any other comments from the board? I don't think any of these people are in the audience, are they, Lauren?
No.
Okay. All right, great. Okay. All right. So I guess all in favor of the following approval and resignation, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Okay, great. All right. Congratulations to everybody. All right. Next item on the agenda, number 15. Can I get a motion to approve? Do we have tax abatements and refunds?
Yes, they're in your packet. Their total is $1,881.36.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to refund that amount.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. And finally, citizens' comments. Did anybody
We have 3 in the queue here.
actually endure? Well, congratulations for hanging on. Okay, great, please.
These are old comments.
These are old ones. 808, 804, 851. Well, she's still there at 851, maybe.
Wait, where are you seeing the comments? Why am I not
In the
seeing?
chat, it's the
Q&A.
it says Q&A. There's a button that says Q&A. There was 3 questions. But is she there?
Oh,
Or did she leave, Lauren?
I'm here.
Did
Sorry.
Robin Phillips leave?
No,
He's
he's
still here.
still here.
Maybe Robin wants to ask the questions or the comments directly.
I'm moving over right now. Okay, Jack.
Yeah, hello. Hi, this is Robin Phillips. It's Mr. Robin Phillips. I'm here with my wife, Terry. We wanted to go back to the discussion you had on beach parking. And firstly, I just wanted to compliment you on the quick action you've taken over the last couple of weeks to help with the situation at the beaches, with the crowding and with the parking. And I think our neighbor, we live on 880 Boston Post Road, which is right around the corner from East Wharf. And so we've seen a lot of improvements with the signage down on East Wharf. What's happened is that as a result of restricting the parking there, the parking's just moved. And so now on Birnbaum Lane, where we live, which is a strip road that runs alongside the Post Road, that is inundated with traffic. Now, the last weekend was not so bad. The 2 weekends before, the weekend before last in particular, was inundated, I have to say, with people. And what's happening is, I know Scott talked about the improvements over the last week, but we're still seeing shuttling. I mean, what's happened now is there is no parking down East Wharf, there's no parking on Fence Creek, and so the parking's moved to Birnbaum Lane. That fills up, and then the overflow goes into the Stop and Shop district and into the car park there. So there are people who are just walking down to the beach, and shuttles are running. We had a Jeep running shuttles 2 weeks ago. We had a minivan running shuttles last weekend, minivans appear and they disgorge, 8 or 10 people. So it really is problematic. So I would like to suggest that we can restrict parking on Birnbaum Lane. because that would help immensely. What we saw last weekend were groups of cars, and there were a whole line of cars from New York State, parked one after the other, and there was a whole group from Massachusetts parked one after the other. So, people are coming into town from quite a long way away. And, I'd say a couple of things. Firstly, COVID is reappearing now, as we know, in communities in the state and in the tri-state area and in New England. And with all of the people coming into town, that is just going to exacerbate the situation. So we really cannot afford to have another outbreak in town and to have to deal with that. And the more we encourage, or the less we discourage people from coming into town from out of state, the higher the likelihood is that that's going to happen. So we just cannot afford that resurgence. So I just wanted to make those points. This is a very difficult situation. We appreciate your attention. We do feel that more parking restrictions are required, and Birnbaum Lane is a target for people now that everywhere else is closed. But it's not just that we're neighbors here. It's on behalf of the town that we would like to ask for those restrictions to come into force.
Thank you very much. And I know typically we don't comment directly back on public comment, but I would like to just say that I will pass on your comments to the police commission. The executive order kind of authorized them to make the appropriate parking decisions based on public safety. And we have talked about Birnbaum Lane. And I know that there was some concerns they had to change any type of parking restrictions there currently, but I will forward on your comments to the police commission so they have them and they can reflect on them. And they'll be continuing to review all the parking policies that they've been putting in place.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. And just very quickly, one other point I'd like to make is, and it was in my Q&A, one of the risks we run as a town is that now people are being turned away from Hammonasset. They're finding that Madison Beaches are pretty neat places to come to. And so one of our risks that we run is that in the post-COVID era, whenever that is, next year or the year after, hopefully, that people are not going to go to Hammonasset anymore. They're just going to head straight to Madison Town Beaches because they know it's a friendly environment, nice little beaches, and we're going to be struggling for space.
Well, I think we're learning a lot from this summer about things that we're going to have to enact in the future. Absolutely, because it is going to be an ongoing problem, and we've been in active dialogue also with the commissioner, the deep commissioner, who's in charge of Hammonasset. And I'm hoping that we can have some sort of, task force to work with them about how to tackle some of these issues. And I think the other thing is that we have a problem now is everybody has GPS and it takes them to the next closest beach, and East Wharf happens to be the next closest beach on GPS after Hammonasset.
Yep.
So
I am happy to work on any task force. So I'm in your system, so just let me know.
okay. Thank you so much for reaching out and for staying. I think you deserve to have some.
Yeah, you get a gold star tonight.
Exactly, for enjoying this meeting. So thank you.
Thank you all for your attention.
Okay, with that, I think, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, good night, everybody.
Good
Okay.
night.
Lauren, there's Lauren's little one.
Yeah, and we'll do the
Aw.
ongoing meeting for starting next week, if that's okay, since we'll start getting it rolling out for next week.
I
Okay.
have three already tomorrow for the facilities audit committee, thanks to you.
So do I. So do I.
Wanted to be
Are we
included.
both on it tomorrow? Are
Yes.
you on it with
Yeah.
me? Oh, good. Oh,
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Our
You can commiserate with me.
Yeah,
And I
good.
think
Perfect.
Justin Murphy